Ok, Yann, tu peux commencer.
Okay, thank you, Zahra. Just to let you know first that translation is available at the bottom of your screen. So you have English for English, of course, French for French, and Japanese, which stands for Arabic. Juste pour donc vous communiquer que la traduction est disponible. Vous avez la possibilité d'avoir cette traduction en français, en anglais et en arabe, mais il faut appuyer sur japonais. في ترجمة موجودة لازم تكبس تحت في 3 لغات عربي بس مكتوب ياباني في كمان فرنسي وفي إنجليزي. So we'd like to welcome you all to this third and last panel of the South seminar. So this panel comes after an intensive week and intensive days of discussions that we had in the framework of Majalat. So we started last week with the thematic workshops. So 2 workshops per thematic areas, which is at the end 12 thematic workshops that we organized last week. And this week, 3 panels, so which are the panels of our South seminar. So the first one was about the economic realities in the neighborhood South. A second panel linked to the geopolitical situation in the region. And I'm pleased here to moderate this third panel about the future EU priorities in the neighborhood South. We will discuss today 2 main priorities in the framework of the next EU budget, which is called the Multiannual Financial Framework. So we are going to discuss first a new modality which has been increased, let's say, in this new budget. So it's a modality with public-private partnerships through blended finance. It is called the EU External Investment Plan. And so the second part of this panel will be dedicated to a discussion around the EU Pact on migration that has been recently published. I would like to say that this panel comes at the right time in the context of the programming phase of the next MFF, but also during the preparation here at the EU side on a joint communication on the neighborhood South, which will be published early next year during the first semester. This policy document will frame the discussions and the main policy of the European Union in the region for the coming years. And of course, civil society will be consulted in this framework. So it comes at, of course, a right moment here, and we will, of course, discuss this future joint communication. So we are going now to start the first panel, the first part, sorry, of this panel, which will tackle the EU External Investment Plan. I'm pleased to welcome here 3 EU representatives in this room. So the first person is Petya Genova, who has 10 years of experience within the EU institutions. She has recently joined the European External Action Service as a policy coordinator for the European Neighbourhood South policy. Petya is part of the team working on the upcoming Joint Commission EES communication on the EU partnership with the Southern Neighbourhood. The second speaker will be Michal Petrick, who's working as a policy coordinator for the European External Action Service, focusing on the European neighborhood. Prior to join the European External Action Service, he spent almost 10 years in the European Commission, notably dealing with microfinance and the G20 cooperation. And our last speaker for the first part will be Electra Tsakalidou, who's working on regional programs in the field of economic development, trade and investment in the Southern Neighbourhood at the European Commission Directorate General for Neighbourhood and Enlargement. She's currently working on the development of the upcoming joint communication for a renewed partnership with the Southern Neighbourhood. And prior than that, Electra was managing cooperation programs on trade and economic affairs in the European Union delegation in Jordan. So I will ask all three panelists to be concise, because the goal here is, of course, to have also a debate with the participants after their presentation. So we'll ask if they can stick to a timing of 30 minutes maximum in order to, so that then we can get the questions from the audience. And I will ask them also to, let's say, to focus on some of the questions that we've already addressed to them. I will just briefly summarize them. So we know that in the next MFF, there will be a single instrument, and following the last developments and agreements reached on this MFF with the European Council and the European Parliament, there will be a decrease of the budget of this single instrument of slightly 10%. I would like then to ask the panelists how the EU will ensure its concrete engagement on the fundamental objectives, which is related to democracy-related actions, civil society support, and assisting communities to recover from severe consequences of the COVID-19. I will also ask them to focus on what are going to be the changes in this single new instrument for the neighborhood south specifically. If there is already an allocation of funds that has been reflected in this single new instrument for the neighborhood south. In the framework of the future joint communication of early next year, I would like also to ask them if they can focus on the consultation which will happen with the civil society and how this consultation will happen. When it comes to the European External Investment Plan, I would like to also ask them to focus on how the EU will ensure transparency and accountability of this financing modality, and how this new modality will be compliant with human rights standards. And if they can also try to focus on what will be the role assigned to the civil society. So here, our first panelists will focus on the general policy priorities of the upcoming joint communication on a renewed partnership with the Southern Neighbourhood. So I will leave the floor to Petya Genova. So Petya, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me with you today. I personally haven't got entirely used to this new way of speaking in public, so I'll try to speak slowly, not too slowly, not too quickly, and I hope clearly, but you stop me or correct me if there is a need to change something in my intervention. So with organizers, we thought that precisely we should start our meeting today with a more general outline of the policy priorities and the current context before diving in to the more specialized and economic topics and policy topics that will follow as just announced. So let me start with emphasizing that the cooperation with the Southern Neighbourhood has always been high on the EU's agenda. But this year, so to say, was calling for a recap, for reconsidering the EU partnership with the South. In 2020, as you know, we marked the 25th anniversary of the start of the Barcelona process, but also 5 years since the European Neighbourhood Policy Review. And actually, exactly on this day today, we mark 1 year since we have a new Commission with ambitious green, digital, and economic transition agenda. So it is only natural that for this time, the strategic interests both of the EU and the Southern Neighbourhood have changed. Then, of course, the COVID pandemic struck, and besides the devastating health and economic consequences, it showed that we are more and more interdependent. So this is the context in which the EU institutions and the member states agreed to seize the moment and use this interdependence to plan common action. As Jon said, it was decided the Commission and the EAS will put forward the joint communication on the renewed partnership between the EU and the South in early 2021. And here, let me put it clearly, it's not intended to reopen or revise the European neighborhood policy. The ENP remains valid. It is the relevant cooperation framework with its objectives and with its principles. The ENP has achieved a lot. It has achieved many of its objectives, but challenges have grown, and they have grown fast. And here, let me mention a few of these challenges, including, of course, conflicts. We still see a surge of terrorism, trafficking, corruption that have not been defeated. We still have significant inequalities between the countries. Then we have young people. Providing youth with opportunities should be, and it will be, the main shared priority. Lack of jobs and perspectives often feeds frustration and leads to instability. Human rights, respect for human rights, fundamental freedom should be guaranteed for all. And then I will also mention that migration should be handled orderly and together. So more can be done, and there is more to be done together. When we work together, we do things better. So working with you as a representative of the civil society, we intend to listen to your views. I will say later more about the modalities of the upcoming public consultation. But our reflection, our experience have already, in our consultation so far with the partners, have shown a few potential areas of cooperation. And again, I'll mention just a few to be concise. The triple transition, which is ahead of us, economic, digital, ecological, is a difficult transition, but it also offers major opportunities. The pandemic has highlighted the need to work and to have diversified value chain, and such resilient value chain needs to rely on well-connected economies. The EU vision for greater economic sovereignty, resilience is inclusive and stretches across the Mediterranean. The Green Deal, which is about producing wealth together, of course, in a greener and a fair way, is another priority, because climate change is a threat to all, but is also an opportunity. It's an opportunity because if with the right actions and investments, there is a lot of potential for renewables in the region, not only sun, but others as well. Then another is the digitalization, which is no doubt priority that has been pointed out as a common goal and priority for each partner on both shores. And then coping, quickly to mention that coping with COVID and emerging stronger is a shared and cross-cutting priority on both shores. But to do this, we need investment. And lessons have shown that public funds will not be enough. Key is to mobilize private investment to develop the blending and the guarantee instruments. And then I leave it to my colleagues to go into that further. And not only investment, but we need also reforms. Investors need to work in a favorable business environment with converging regulations and standards. They need to draw on skilled human capital, infrastructure, and innovation. And here, respect for human rights, good governance, and rule of law, which is one of the principles, the EMP, are central for building this new connected and thriving economies. They're key to respond also to expectation of civil society and the citizens, not only of the economic operators. And that's why we need to involve all. We always tend to, and we always looking forward for the views of the stakeholders and the civil society, because we have to, it's for everyone to share the effort, the ideas, and the responsibility. And to top on this process, of course, there is a need for security. And with terrorism, which is still alive, organized crime also knows no borders, not only the challenges. We should strengthen the dialogue and the cooperation in the best way, so we get a sort of a mandate for the population, trusting that all rights are respected and defended. I will not stop on the other key dimension of our relationship and another key cooperation area, which is migration and mobility, which will be discussed. And I'll finish with a confirmation that we are aware that each situation of each partner is specific. The EU will remain its tailor-made approach to each partner's need, but these challenges cannot be addressed only at bilateral level. So EU is keeps promoting regional and sub-regional cooperation through the UFM, through the dialogue with the civil society, and then it's not only the cooperation of the future does not only deals with encourages only regional cooperation, but also intra-regional with Africa, with the Gulf countries. So we're looking forward to listen to your views. We are planning, we are launching any moment now, today or tomorrow, a public consultation. You know, the format is the questionnaire with open and not open, and question with choice, which will run till 20th of December. It's open to all citizens, stakeholders, organizations. And I'll have to send you the link immediately when it's available, as I said, any moment now, so you can distribute among all the participants and beyond. Then there will be a report on that with all the summarizing the contributions, which will feed into the reflections on the communication. So it's the classic public consultation approach. And I don't know if I was too quick and clear, but I'll finish here, and I'm looking forward for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Petya. So if you already have the link, or if you will have it during the course of this panel, I advise you to share it within the chat box of the software here. But of course, we will closely follow this and see how Majalat and all its network of civil society organizations can be involved in this upcoming joint communication. So now I will leave the floor to Michal Patrick, who's going to discuss and present the external investment plan and its achievement. Michal.
Thank you, Yor. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Adrian, and thank you also for the question which you presented in the beginning. what we thought would be useful for participants is to start a little bit with saying what the external investment plan is, what was done already until now, and then Electra would then focus more on what will be done in the future. Well, the external investment plan is started already in 2017. There came the idea of to have a sort of a more holistic and comprehensive approach to economic and social development. And what we will do now, as of 2021, builds on this successful practice that we had since 2021, and with blending even earlier. When it started, it tried to achieve multiple goals. It was to contribute to sustainable development, encourage private investment while focusing on jobs and growth, and also improving the investment climate. And at the time, the external investment plan covered the neighborhood, both east and south, as well as the sub-Saharan Africa. And this is one of the things that you will see changing with the new instrument, but still having dedicated focus on the regions I mentioned, and as Petya said, a tailor-made approach to all. The external investment plan actually has 3 pillars, and as Petya said, it's not only about financing. I mean, there are other elements that are important to create sort of a comprehensive and efficient package. The first pillar is indeed the financing, and that's the so-called European Fund for Sustainable Development, the successor of which will start in 2021, the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus. What this fund is as Jon mentioned, it's on the one hand, it's blending, which was based on the neighborhood investment facility, now called the Neighborhood Investment Platform. And this actually helps blending the EU funds, so putting together the EU funds together with additional finance from other public or private sources. And it could have different forms. It could be investment grants, it could be sort of technical assistance specifically for a project, or it could be interest rate support, for example. And in addition to blending, which has been there for quite some time, in 2017, the very new thing was the new Efsd Guarantee, which was supposed to help de-risking the operation of our partners, so sort of incentivize them to go beyond what would they have done on their own and try to steer them towards even more riskier operations while helping achieve the goals which were set for the investment plan. And for example, there were different investment windows created, which are telling about where the guarantee was focusing. For example, there was the support for the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, sustainable energy, agriculture, digital transformation, and so on. And of course, this year with the COVID-19 pandemic, there was also a significant reorientation of what the guarantee support to focus on the sort of the most immediate needs, be it in the health sector with the development there, or helping the MSMEs survive the cash issues they may have, and so on as a result of the pandemic. So this is the first arm, the sort of the first pillar, the financing part. But there are also 2 other pillars which are equally, or I could say even more important. The second pillar is specifically about technical assistance, and its aim is to help develop sustainable and bankable projects. Because while we can have the funding under the first pillar, it's also important to create a pipeline of projects that can actually be funded in partner countries. So that's where this second pillar comes in. And then lastly, it's the third pillar, and Petya also already mentioned this. It's about policy dialogue and reform support. So the aim is to overall improve the climate, or the investment climate and the business environment in partner countries. And maybe to say what has been more concretely done until now, we actually last month published the latest 2019 report on the implementation of the external investment plan, and there you can see all all the relevant figures and list of projects. So please feel free to download it from our website. And there you can also see that already 5.1 billion of EU funding has been invested, and this should normally create or leverage additional financing reaching 50.1 billion. So there's the leverage effect of 10, meaning that €1 of the EU funding produces 10 euros of, almost 10 euros of investment. And as I said, this was one of the main things, because we all know that the development needs are quite high, and the funding itself is always limited. So this leverage effect is an important element. In addition to this, another 600 million were used for funding reforms for investment and climate support. Specific for blending, it now stands at 3.1 billion, out of which 1.3 billion is in the neighborhood itself, and then more than half is in the southern neighborhood. And for guarantees, roughly 1/3 is in the neighborhood overall. I think I would stay here, so to leave also more space for questions. Please, if you have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michal. Of course, I suppose there will be questions raised, and I suppose that the interest of the participants will be also on how this plan will, let's say, target also the most vulnerable people, knowing that we are in a context of a rising inequality. And all this plan also will support local economic actors, knowing that, in most of the countries targeted, the informal economy plays a very important role. So we will be keen also to hear you on this later when the questions will come. Now I will leave the floor to Electra Tsakalidou to briefly discuss the MFF and the future programming in the region. So we'll ask you, Electra, to try to be brief so that we will have 30 minutes of discussions with the participants then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jon. Thank you, Michal. Thank you, Petja. So after Petja and Michal outlined the broader policy perspective that will govern the EU relations with the Southern Neighbourhood, I would like to focus my short intervention into 3 parts. The first one is give you a little bit more information on the Multiannual Financial Framework. The second one, describe a little bit where we're going in terms of the programming for cooperation with the neighborhood, both at the bilateral and the regional level, and then dive into the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, which is going to complement what the European Fund for Sustainable Development is doing currently. I am obviously aware that not everyone around is an expert on EU budgeting. So what I would like first to clarify is that the Multiannual Financial Framework, or the MFF, is the instrument that determines the budget spending of the EU for at least 5 years. In our case, it will be for 2021-2027. The procedure to establish the MFF is twofold. First of all, a proposal is submitted by the European Commission, which sets out the specific regulation, including the different instrument and its structure and its legal basis. And then this proposal has to be adopted by unanimity by member states and receive consent of the European Parliament. What I will do is I will spare you months of intense negotiations because we don't have the time. But what is worth noting is that the 10 November political agreement between the Parliament and the Council ensures that EU institutions will cooperate more effectively to make sure that 1.8 trillion euros goes to where specific needs are in a both timely and transparent manner. And some of the key features of this agreement is the reinforcement of priority programs of about 15 billion euros compared to the agreement that was reached on the 21st of July. And that will ensure that the EU budget will continue to play a role to support, first of all, the recovery from the pandemic, but also ensure that beneficiaries of EU funds receive the sufficient means to continue their work during these very challenging times. How does that affect the neighborhood? The Neighbourhood Development in International Cooperation Instrument, NDICI, has been upped by 1 billion euros to reach 71.8 billion euros in 2018 prices, which means that for the whole world, there is a pool that is available, and that is now going to be further negotiated to determine how much of that will be attributed to the southern neighborhood. There have been a lot of interest from the European Parliament and some member states to divide the split for the neighborhood and ensure that 2/3 of that funding is allocated for the southern neighborhood. But obviously, the first step is for the MFF to be endorsed and formally adopted by the Parliament and the Council, and then for the different elements, so the NDICI instrument, to be further negotiated and finalized. As far as the NDICI negotiations were concerned, civil society has been involved in the process by a formalized consultation mechanism. This has been made public, and the contributions were taken into account in the process for the NDICI negotiations. So I will leave it here. I'll move on to programming. So the planning based on the outcome of the joint communication that Petya mentioned earlier, the planning for the Commission's cooperation with the region for the period 2021-2027 and its related programming will be based, first of all, on areas that are covered by the joint communication, as well as discussion with partner countries. These are obviously will take place in the course of 2021. What we expect is that negotiations on the regional aspects will be finalized before the bilateral ones, allowing for discussion on the ground with EU delegations to come up with a series of priorities and then allocate them to the right type of instruments in order to be able to tackle some of the challenges Petya mentioned earlier and take advantage of the opportunities. When it comes to the EFSD Plus and how that will feature into that programming, in terms of the framework, it will include integrated budgetary guarantees and financial instruments that will be covered by the NDICI instrument. And what it will do is that it will provide EU budgetary guarantees to the European Investment Bank or other international financial institution to support public and private investment aligned with EU priorities, like an economy that works for people or the green and digital transition within the partner countries. Some of the main assumptions is, first of all, that it will be an integrated approach so that there will be several instruments that could be leveraged. The second one is that it will be based on a policy-first principle, which means that some of the priorities and the needs that have been identified will guide the areas where the EFSD Plus will become active in the different countries, and that it will cover both sovereign, sub-sovereign, and private sector operations, which means that on some of the areas you mentioned, such as job creation, involvement of localities, there will be different ways to leverage the funds under the EFSD Plus and obviously under the external investment plan and its pillars on technical assistance and policy dialogue. How does civil society and the private sector engage on this work? It will be twofold. First of all, EU delegations on the ground will reach out to their networks at the bilateral level. The second one is, as for the regional level, Majalat and other regional entities will be engaged in order to determine what priorities for engagement could be. And then we ask for proactively civil society to reach out to the colleagues in EU delegations working on the different aspects in order to highlight what the specific needs are, both at the country level, at the regional level, and even at the micro, so local level. I think I will leave it here. What I would like to join, I will put the link in the chat, is for anyone who's interested in following the process for the negotiations of the MFF so far. There's an NGO called Concord Europe that has been advocating on the external dimensions and the NDICI instrument that has created a very interesting timeline. So for anyone who wants to delve into that, I'll put the link in the chat. I will leave it here. Looking forward to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Electra, for these interesting informations that you've shared. So we of course, most of us, I suppose, in the civil society sector, we know what Concord is doing, and especially in line with advocating on the current MFF. But indeed, it would be useful that you can share the link here in the chat box so that it can be accessible to all the participants. So now there is time now for interaction, and so I will start collecting questions from the audience. I see there are two ways to address the questions. Either you can use the chat box. There are two, let's say, ways. There is a chat button or a Q&R function below that you've most probably seen. Another possibility also is that you can raise your hand. And I see that for the moment, two participants have already raised their hands. So we'll now leave the floor to Maher Issa, who would like to ask a question here. So Maher, tfaddal.
Good morning for everybody. My question is also, can I
yes.
My question, but it's too long, but I would explain it in a brief.
Yeah, just briefly. We need to be very short here because we have to leave the floor to everybody. But yeah,
okay.
Please ask your question.
My question is on the external investment plan and the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus. There is a paragraph, it's very interesting, states that this means that the EU will discuss the partner countries and other stakeholders, their investment needs, gaps, and priorities. My question, I have already two questions on this point. There is a noise there, would everybody unmute or mute themselves? Okay. First question, to which extent this debate or argument with each country would contribute to achieve sustainable development in partner countries, considering the different contexts, variety of countries' constraints and key actors' needs in each country, either the public institution or the nature of the regime itself, the private sector and the civil society, as well as the interrelationships between these actors within each country and transnational and the cross-border as well, that might each country has its own cross-border activities with each other. So to which extent this will be contributing to achieve sustainable development? Is it one stampa, one dogma, or there will be a country-based support scheme for each country? Second question, would these interventions of the EU reach finally to the vision of creating a green social solidarity economy? I'm not saying that 100% perfect, but plus minus in terms of proportionally. In countries like Egypt, for example, considering the nature of the regime, the coup and the corruption there, or in Lebanon reaching 50%, there will be fine. But in a country in like Palestine, a new independent state is going on, you can create such an assistance that really can overcome the challenges and the shortcomings that could be within the performance of the authorities as well as civil society. So to which extent this will be achieved, and within the whole region as well as the Mediterranean might be a final destiny of all the region residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Maher. I see in the chat box that we have also another question from Fabio Alberti, which is linked to the trade imbalance between the EU and the Mediterranean countries, which increased after trade agreements entered into force. Will the EU want to change the agreements to reduce this imbalance? So I propose that we can already take these questions. So the one of Maher and the one of Fabio. And I will ask to the EU panelists if they have specific answers on these questions. So I do not know who would like to answer here. So out of the three panelists.
Jon, I can take the question on programming and the question on trade.
Okay.
So I will start with the programming. Thank you very much, Maher, for your question. As Petia said, there is no one size fits all, and this is what the objective of consultations after the communication, the joint communication on the renewed partnership with the Southern Neighbourhood is adopted, that will guide the bilateral consultations that will be led by the European Union delegations on the ground in order to determine what priority areas would be for each country, and what type of instruments could be used in order to ensure that some of the concerns you've raised with regards to sustainable development, with regards to social inclusion, are addressed. Obviously, this is not something that the EU can do on its own. It will require the buy-in of the government. It will require the buy-in of other donors that are extremely active. And this is where the collaboration with our EU member states that are active on the ground could take place, whether through what we call joint programming, so the development of joint programs, or through Team Europe initiatives, something that started during the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So over the next few months, you will see an increasing dialogue in order to determine what the priorities should be for our programming for the period 2021-2027. When it comes to EU trade relations and the increase in the trade imbalance, so the EU has trade relations with 8 of its southern Mediterranean partners, and these are governed by association agreements that were set in place in the late 90s and early 2000s. So our colleagues at the Directorate General for Trade in 2018 launched an external independent evaluation on the impact of these Euro-Mediterranean Association Agreements between 6 of them, all of them except the one for Israel and Palestine. And the final report, which is due to be published in 2021, concludes more broadly that the EU-Mediterranean Association Agreements have actually created new opportunities for Euro-Mediterranean trade and have had a positive impact both on the EU side and for Southern Mediterranean partners, both in terms of trade, GDP, and welfare. At this point in time, though, we understand your concerns, and the Director General for Trade is in the process of revising its trade policy in order to make it more fit for current realities. And some of this reflection will be featured in the future joint communication for a renewed partnership with the Southern Neighbourhood, in terms of determining how we can best leverage trade and investment, and whether there is a possibility, for example, to expand some of this FTA's coverage to include services, foreign direct investment, agriculture, based on the need of the partners. So this is an ongoing reflection. There was a public consultation for the trade policy review, as well as dialogue with Executive Vice President and Trade Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis that took place in the course of November 2020, and that will come to more concrete examples in the course of the beginning of 2021. Thank you.
So thank you, Electra. So would like also to see if someone from the three EU representatives would like to answer on the question linked to sustainable development and achieve the goals of sustainable development in partner countries. And if I can ask to the panelists to keep the three panelists to keep their camera on, so that it will be, you know, easier, you know, for, let's say, the broadcasting of the debate. So does someone wants to answer to the question linked to sustainable development?
Yes, thank you, Jon, and thank you, Maher, for the question. No, I mean, on this, I could just maybe reiterate what I said, that the contribution to sustainable development was already an important element, an important goal of the initial external investment plan, and continues, of course, to remain that in the future as well. Maybe also there, I think there was a question also on this cross-border activities. This is indeed an important element, and there will be opportunities for this region-wide approach. What is actually new with the NDICI is that thanks to its global nature, there will also be possibilities for even cross-regional activities, for example, between the North Africa and the Sub-Saharan Africa and so on. Thank you.
So thank you, Michal. We've received also in the meantime a question linked to you know, which role migration and migration management will play both in the new communication and the new ENI. It's actually not the new ENI, but the new communication indeed. I propose that we can address this question just at the end, so that we can introduce the second part of our panel, which will be essentially linked to the EU Pact on Migration. But here I would still like, let's say, to give the floor to the participants who would like to ask questions linked to let's say the EU external sorry, investment plan, or any related question linked to the programming of the next MFF. So
Jon,
yes.
can I ask a question? Sorry, I couldn't raise my hand.
No
This
problem.
is Bihter. Okay.
Of course.
Thank you. Actually, after what has been said, we understand we are really in a critical moment. No, we have the MFF, we have the Efsd Plus coming. We are expecting a new communication for the neighborhood and new trade policy, the revision. So there are a lot new things happening at the EU side, but we should also remember that there are a lot of new things happening at the southern neighborhood side as well. And the critical issue here, and what I want to ask is a general question to all the three EU colleagues, is the key concept of policy coherence for development. And from the previous term and assessment that they have taken from the different tools and different mechanisms that were implemented, how do they see what is the best way ahead that they will ensure policy coherence for development? Because the realities of the region regarding Green Deal or the digitalization is very much different than what the EU prioritizing for itself, obviously. So ensuring policy coherence for development will remain a key to success, that we don't have gaps again from both shores of the Mediterranean. So my question is to any of them, if they would like to reply, and to understand what measures put ahead to ensure policy coherence for development. Thank you.
Thank you, Biter. I let you answer.
Maybe in the order of interventions, then it's a difficult question. I mean, it's, of course, it's always in the center of our policies and objectives. We do whatever is done at a level is within that goal of narrowing the gap of coherence for development. That's why this will be also one of the challenges to be addressed in the communication. So, and the proposed actions there. Of course, which will also be contributing to that goal. I mean, it's not something that can be achieved easily, but for sure we can work towards it together. There is the Green Deal is not only for the EU; it's our strategy for growth, and it's also for the partners. Of course, we are aware also of the difficulties, and it's for sure a topic to be discussed. On the impact of this on both shores, by the way. And here, on my part, I can only invite you to submit all the concerns and all the contributions to the stakeholder consultation. And I leave to my colleagues if they add something.
Thank you, Petya. So Electra or Michal, I suppose you would like also maybe to add something?
I'll keep it very brief because Petya has covered pretty much everything. In terms of the programming and matching the tools with the policy priorities, the element of coherence is going to be one of the first priorities, both in Brussels, but also for the delegations that are active on the ground. And as Petya mentioned, what we invite you to do is to keep a constant flow of dialogue with our colleagues in delegations and with us in headquarters in order to make sure to flag some of the issues of concern. The two priorities of the joint communication and its approach are to keep the approach tailor-made, understanding what the specific needs of the countries and the regions are, and that will hopefully be reflected in the document and then in the subsequent partnership priorities and in the programming. And also to make sure that everything is based on dialogue and exchange. And our commissioner, for example, has reached out to some of the countries in the southern neighborhood. There has been dialogue from our hierarchies with the governments. We're opening the public consultation. So the objective is to get as many opinions and voices heard as possible in order to make sure that the needs assessment is accurate, at least in this recovery period from the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. Over to you, Jan.
Thank you, Electra. So I'm looking if there are some other questions. In the meantime, I've shared the link of the website of Concord with the timeline on the MFF. So if you can just confirm then, Electra, if it's the right one, I suppose yes, but just to be sure. I see that Abdelhadi Benis would like to ask a question, so we'll leave him the floor. Abdelhadi? Ton micro, Abdelhadi, est sur mute, donc on ne t'entend pas encore. Il faut désactiver le micro. Les aléas de webinaire.
Oui, maintenant, vous
voilà.
m'entendez?
Oui, oui.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Alors, je vais être très rapide, mais j'ai deux questions et deux propositions. Alors, la première question, c'est que les deux points qui nous intéressent le plus dans la rive sud de la Méditerranée, c'est le changement climatique et puis l'action de la société civile. Alors, ces deux éléments sont dilués dans l'ensemble des programmes. Et c'est tout à fait normal, ça je le comprends, mais est-ce que Monsieur Patrick pourrait peut-être nous donner une idée globale sur ce que représente le budget pour les changements climatiques et ce que représente le budget pour la société civile. Ça, c'est pour la première question. La deuxième question, nous avons travaillé beaucoup ici, nous sommes un réseau d'ONG, on a travaillé beaucoup sur la création d'un projet qu'on a appelé la Maison méditerranéenne pour le climat. Alors ma question, c'est quelles sont les modalités pour faire parvenir un petit peu ce projet au niveau de la décision de l'Union européenne? Quelles sont les procédures, les grandes procédures? Alors maintenant, deux propositions. Il y a quelque chose qui nous inquiète énormément dans la rive sud de la Méditerranée, c'est le devenir de l'agriculture avec le changement climatique. Alors, je voudrais que, si c'est possible, qu'on puisse augmenter le budget pour ce domaine-là de l'agriculture parce que c'est vital pour nous. Je vous signale que le taux de remplissage de nos barrages cette année au Maroc n'est que de tiers. Alors, c'est assez préoccupant. Deuxièmement, un enseignement que nous avons tiré de la pandémie par rapport à l'équilibre entre le privé et le public, c'est que les pouvoirs publics ont donné priorité dans toutes leurs activités à tout ce qui est public. Et ça s'est traduit concrètement, par exemple, dans le domaine de l'enseignement, par la fermeture d'un grand nombre d'écoles privées que nous avons construit depuis 15 ans qu'on est en train de construire un tissu d'écoles privées. Et donc, ma suggestion, c'est que dans le budget de l'Union européenne, qu'on fasse attention à ça et que les secteurs privés qui sont très menacés, qu'on leur donne priorité. Voilà, je vous remercie beaucoup.
Merci. Thank you, Abdelhadi. So I don't know who would like to answer to these two questions.
Maybe I could start with the first part of the answer.
Okay.
Specifically on this climate change. In this is an important issue that we're facing, and what we actually try to address, or the activities will try to address it. But as for the importance of it, I could already mention that this objective of fighting climate change is specifically mentioned in the delegation, which in its proposal already says that in order to achieve these objectives, actions under these regulations, so the actions that will be financed under the NDICI, are expected to contribute 25% of its overall envelope to this goal. So there is sort of a dedicated budget for this. I mean, of course, for the specific actions, this will have to be determined in time, but the overall goal is there. And also looking into the past, and you could find more information in the report on the EIP and how it performed online. But there you could also see the percentage of projects that were dealing with the environment, water issues, agriculture, and so on. So this is indeed an important element. And as I mentioned, there is a dedicated, or in the current EFSD there is a dedicated window both for sustainable energy, there is a dedicated window for agriculture, and I would expect this to also be the case for the future EFSD+. But there, of course, the work on this is still ongoing, also in line with the investment needs, as mentioned by Electra. Thank you.
Thank you, Michal. So there is also the let's say the other question related to agriculture. I would like maybe to couple it because I don't know if Electra would like to say something on this question, but I would like also to couple it with a comment and a question that has been raised so that we can end with the first part of this panel. So the question here is this one. So did I understand appropriately that the deep comprehensive free trade agreement approach to trade policy will more or less remain in place in the future towards neighborhood countries, despite that Tunisia decided to suspend the negotiations last year, reportedly due to a lack of matching interests and, according to the interpretation of the participants, the heightened risk of losing policy space. So I don't know, Electra, if you were planning to answer to the question of Abdelhadi on agriculture specifically. If you can also answer that one so that we can end the first part of the panel.
Thank you very much, Jon. Thank you very much, Abdelhadi, for your questions. In terms of the risks posed by climate change and demographics on sustainable agriculture and food security, this is a priority that has actually been flagged in our bilateral dialogues with our partners quite consistently. And indeed, I believe that in the course of the programming for 2021-2027, the food climate change nexus is going to be increasingly tackled both in our bilateral programming, but also at the regional level. We have both regional programs that aim at promoting sustainable development and that complement some of the initiatives that take place in the countries, especially at the local level. And it's something we're going to try to take into account increasingly for the next period. And then when it comes to the DCFTA, as I mentioned, the colleagues in the Directorate General for Trade are undergoing a reflection about the coherence and future of trade policy, and the future of association agreements for the region is being discussed and will be under consultation with partners over the coming year for sure. So as I said, this doesn't mean that the DCFTA as we know it is dead or is very much alive. It means that there is a reflection ongoing about how to include areas such as services, investment in agriculture in association agreements based on current macroeconomic and trade realities.
Okay, so thank you, Electra. So would like to especially thank you again, the three of you, for your involvement and your interventions. Now we are going to start the discussions around the second part of this panel, which is about the EU Pact on migration. So I have the pleasure today to welcome three panelists representing the EU. So the first panelist will be Georgiana Plezou from the Directorate General for Migration and Home Affairs. She's been working for DG Home for over 8 years. She's currently responsible for the coordination and the implementation of the external dimension of the new Pact on Migration and Asylum, and as well as the coordination of the Euro-African Dialogue on Migration and Development, which is the Rabat process. The second panelist today will be Georgia Papagianni, who's a member of the legal service of the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs, currently working for the European External Action Service in the MENA Regional and Horizontal Affairs Unit. And she's, of course, an expert on European migration law and policy. And the last panelist today will be Francesca Fabri, who's policy officer in the Migration Task Force of the European Commission's Directorate General for Neighbourhood and Enlargement Negotiations. So she follows the overall policy and programming aspects to migration and development cooperation in the southern neighborhood. So again, here I will ask the three panelists to be concise and try to focus, let's say, on the questions we've addressed to them already. So altogether, let's say, I would like to stick to the interventions of the three of you around 25 minutes, if possible, so that we can then leave the floor to the audience for a round of questions. And of course, I take already the questions, the question, sorry, that has been asked by one of the participants. So here we will be keen to hear about what will be the new features in this pact and what will be the impact of it for the Mediterranean countries, and how the EU will ensure that the proposed screening mechanisms at its external borders, as well as its accelerated procedures, are compliant with human rights standards. We will be keen also to hear a bit about, there was a discussion about 10% of the single instrument being earmarked for migration-related spending. So we would like to hear a bit how these additional funds in the instrument will be concretely contributing to development. I will leave the floor now to Georgiana Plesou from DG Home, so that she will set the scene on the pact and present the context of it. And if I can ask the three panelists to switch on the camera. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm trying to switch on the camera, but I see that the host has stopped it. Is it possible that you allow me to open up the camera?
Yeah, we'll so we see with my colleague of INND. So if you can
try now.
Just 1 second.
Yes, great, it's working. So, and if I can, and if I can ask to Georgia and Francesca also to switch on their cameras.
I have the same problem, hi Jan. I have the same problem as Georgiana.
Okay, so my colleagues from INND will...
You are now all allowed to open your camera.
Okay, great. And then Georgia, great. Okay. So Georgiana, I leave you the floor.
Thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this event. In my presentation, I will give a broad overview of the Pact on Migration and Asylum, aiming also to clarify some of the elements put forward in the concept note prepared for this session. I will start by saying that migration is a normal phenomenon. It has always been part of our societies and will always be there. In 2019, almost 21 million non-EU nationals were legally resident in the EU. These people contribute to our economy and to our society, and Europe needs migration. At the same time, it needs to better manage migration. And for this purpose, on 23rd of September, the Commission proposed a new Pact on Migration and Asylum, covering all of the different elements needed for a comprehensive European approach to migration. The Pact has put forward a chapeau communication, 5 legislative proposals, as well as 4 non-legislative initiatives. And it is based on 3 main pillars. First one, more effective and integrated procedures. In particular, the Commission proposed to introduce an integrated border procedure, which for the first time includes a pre-entry screening covering identification of all people crossing the EU's external borders without permission or having been disembarked after a search and rescue operation. The border procedure can take up to maximum 12 weeks to decide whether people are eligible for asylum or have to be relocated or returned. The aim is to speed up the decision-making process and to make asylum procedures more efficient. At the same time, the Pact also seeks to boost a common EU system for return. Next year, the Commission will adopt a new sustainable voluntary return and reintegration strategy to increase and improve the voluntary returns. I would like to clarify that all necessary guarantees will be put in place to ensure that every person would have an individual assessment and essential guarantees remain in full and with full respect for the principle of non-refoulement and fundamental rights. Medical cases, unaccompanied minors, and families with small children are excluded from the border procedures. To guarantee effective access to the procedures and respect for fundamental rights, member states, working closely with the Fundamental Rights Agency, will put in place an effective monitoring mechanism. This monitoring mechanism should cover in particular the respect of fundamental rights in relation to the screening, as well as the respect of the applicable national rules in the case of detention and compliance with the principle of non-refoulement. It should furthermore ensure that complaints are dealt with very swiftly and in an appropriate way. The second pillar, the need to balance solidarity and responsibility sharing. The Commission has proposed mandatory solidarity when member states are under pressure. Taking into account the different realities of member states and fluctuating migratory pressure, the Commission proposed a system of flexible contributions from the member states. This contribution can range from relocation of asylum seekers to returning individuals with no right to stay, as well as capacity building support. A specific solidarity mechanism for search and rescue operations is also foreseen based on voluntary contributions, which may become mandatory if the voluntary approach proves ineffective. The third pillar, strengthening partnerships with third countries. My colleague Georgia will provide more details on this. But what I would like to emphasize is that our aim is indeed to have genuine, balanced, mutually beneficial, and comprehensive migration partnerships. And they will focus on 5 areas of action: protection of those in need and supposed to refugee hosting countries, boosting economic opportunities in the countries of origin, reinforcing capacities on counters migrant smuggling and border management. And in this context, next year we will adopt a new action plan on counter smuggling, fostering cooperation on return and readmission, and developing legal pathways. The Pact puts forward a common governance for migration with better strategic planning to ensure that the EU and national policies are aligned, and enhanced monitoring of migration management on the ground. It also enhances our preparedness for crisis. The Pact also proposes a more coordinated EU approach to search and rescue, in particular with a recommendation on the cooperation between member states with regard to search and rescue, and with a specific guidance which aims at clarifying that the EU law cannot be interpreted as allowing the criminalization of humanitarian assistance mandated by law, including for search and rescue activities carried by non-state actors while complying with the relevant legal framework. Legal migration is also a very important part of the Pact. We do need a credible legal migration and integration policy. We will launch the revision of the EU Blue Card Directive, and we have launched a public consultation in view of revising the current legislation in the area of legal migration to facilitate the admission of workers of different skills to the EU and intra-EU mobility of third country nationals. I would also like you to invite to check this public consultation, which is currently available online. I can send you afterwards the link in the chat box so that you can also provide your views by the deadline of 30th of December. In addition to this, we will explore the development of an EU-wide talent pool for third country skilled workers, which could operate as an EU-wide platform for international recruitment. The Pact also recommended to formalize the ad hoc scheme of approximately 29,500 resettlement places already being implemented by the member states. In addition, the Commission will support member states to establish community or private sponsorship schemes. Building on the experience with the pilot projects, we will launch talent partnerships to support legal migration and mobility with key partner countries. The aim of the talent partnerships is to provide alternative legal pathways. The Pact specifically mentions that support is needed to maximize the positive impact of migration and reduce the negative consequences for partner countries, for example, reducing the brain drain and facilitating circular migration. Our last initiative on 24th of November, the Commission presented a new comprehensive action plan on the integration and inclusion of third country nationals for 2021-2024. The action plan promotes the inclusion for all, recognizing the important contribution of migrants to the EU and addressing barriers that can hinder participation and inclusion of people with a migrant background in the European society. It also sets out new actions which build on the achievements of the previous action plan on integration from 2016. I would like to conclude my intervention here, and I look forward to our discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgiana. So again, as you said, I advise you to share the link in the chat box with regards to the public consultation on the Pact, as obviously it's strongly interested the civil society. So now we'll leave the floor to Georgia Papagianni. I just hope the pronunciation is correct. Who will be speaking about the overall political framework of the EU cooperation with the South partners under the new Pact. Georgia.
Thank you very much, Jon. Good morning, everybody. I will try in my intervention to address also some of the questions that were in the concept paper. There were two questions. One was on what were the migration determinants that explain the migration flows from MENA countries. And there was also another one on what's new on this Pact. So in a first, my intervention will have two parts. In a first part, I'll try to present briefly, to share with you briefly the key elements of the Pact. And in a second part, I will try to show a bit what is the impact of the Pact on the southern neighborhood that is of interest to us. So first of all, let's start with the Pact. What is really new? In my opinion, there's not much new, because this is, and it's not something that is bad. It shows that there is a coherence. It's a policy that the European Union has started developing in the last decade. It's a policy that's around the concept of partnership. It's a policy that builds on the concept of the partnership framework that was launched in 2016. It's a policy that builds on Valletta, a policy that builds on Abidjan, a policy that builds on the EU input in the UN compacts, and it's a policy that, as Georgiana said, builds around the fact that we accept that migration is a fact of life. So the whole idea is like how we can jointly with our partners address the challenges of migration and seize the opportunities that migration is offering, because migration is offering opportunities for everybody involved, both the countries of origin, the countries of transit, the countries of destination, and most important, the migrants themselves. So this, in a way, there is a continuation of a policy. What is new with this new Pact is the fact that we have a new political momentum at this moment. And specifically in our neighborhood, it's even more important because the Pact coincides also with the whole process of the relaunch of our relationship, of our political relationship with our southern partners. Of the process, you know, last week we've seen the discussions, the debates, the very frank and fruitful debates in Barcelona, and that will build and lead to the upcoming Commission communication on the renewed southern neighborhood. The key elements of the Pact, if I could summarize them in a nutshell, is the fact that, as Georgiana said, it's holistic. It's holistic and it's comprehensive, not only in its migration aspects, as Georgiana has explained in detail, that it covers aspects from borders to legal migration, to combating irregular migration, smuggling, etc. But it's comprehensive and it's holistic also because it sees migration as an element of the overall relations with the third parties, not the key element, not the core element, but as one out of many elements that and needs to be fully embedded in our relations with third countries. And as we see it from the point of view of the European External Action Service is something that it needs to be firmly embedded in the EU's foreign policy. Another characteristic that is very important of both of the Pact, but also on this narrative and this approach that the European Union has been building, as I've said, for the last years, is the fact that the Pact is centered around the concept of partnership, around the concept of win-win and mutually beneficial dialogues and relationships and partnerships with key countries with whom we need to cooperate. And we are in the logic is that this is a joint challenge that requires a joint reply and requires also co-responsibility. And the EU in the last years has shown that it has taken up its responsibility, but it's something that needs to be, it's an approach that needs to be forged and needs to be implemented in close cooperation with our partners. We're moving away, it's not anymore, as we've been criticized, on the donor-recipient logic. It's the logic more of partners being on an equal footing and addressing a joint global challenge. And the last point that is very important also of the Pact is that it links internal and external aspects. It focuses a lot on this aspect. Now, let me turn to our specific cooperation with our southern partners. What are the challenges and what are the main drivers? The main drivers, as it's in all other areas of regions in the world, drivers, the reasons for which make people move are conflicts, abuses of human rights, lack of rule of law, lack of democracy in the countries, and also lack of development, unemployment, big numbers of youth. And we see that there is specifically, these are much more stronger in our region, where the differences and the gap, the economic gap between the two shores of the Mediterranean is still very strong, very deep. We see also it's a question of demographics, it's a question of lack of development, etc. So the whole approach of the EU is mostly, it's like, on the one hand, to see that, you know, we cooperate closely, and on the other hand, to embed migration in this whole concept of relaunching our relationship and addressing the root causes of irregular migration through actions, for example, through investments, through bringing in the private sector, through measures of aiming at promoting job creation, measures promoting the role of youth, and these measures addressing, you know, like which is now, it's a very important factor also, COVID recovery, because it's something that who's going to be the key priority on both shores of the Mediterranean. The key challenge in this crossroads where we are, as we see it, is on the one hand to try to turn these challenges, be it migration, lack of development, etc., into opportunities, and seize all the opportunities that COVID has created. COVID has just exacerbated challenges that were already there. But we need to use this political momentum, to use this opportunity in order to turn this tragedy into a stepping stone in creating a more stable and more prosperous region. What could be in the specific, as we see it, some specific, in this one, obviously we need to take into account the specificities both of our neighbors and take into account both the needs but also the interests of both sides of both shores of the Mediterranean. And we need to try and forge with our neighbors a positive agenda. In this context, I think that the concepts that are already mentioned in the Pact and could be further developed is concepts like, for example, triangular cooperation, because it's a challenge that we face jointly with our partners, because most of our partners, notably in Northern Africa, have become themselves countries of destination. So we both have an interest in addressing this challenge jointly. And the other aspect that is also important and which we need to build is to cooperate also with regional and bring regional actors. For example, the African Union, UN, locally, and we've seen that this trilateral cooperation, for example, in the case of Libya, has really led to a paradigm shift and has also brought very concrete and very tangible and very important outcomes. So when we are all of us and try both the EU, the partners, but also regional actors and the UN and international actors, and try to work on a positive narrative and towards a joint objective, I think this is the only way forward, and it's in the interest and for the benefit of all of us. So that is for me. I'm ready to take any questions and looking very much forward to hearing your views and participating in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. So before taking questions from the audience, I'm going to leave the floor to Francesca Fabri, who's going to talk about the implication of the Pact for cooperation and migration under the new EU budget, and of course with a focus in the ENPI South region. And also to give a quick overview on what the EU has been doing so far with the EU trust funds and bilateral programming. So Francesca, as you are the last one, I will ask you also to be brief. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Indeed, I will, as my colleagues already covered so many important themes of discussion, I will not take too much time and trying to be brief to the core of what I think it's important to know as regards the implications of the new pact for the cooperation on migration under the new MFF, in particular in the South region, and talking about where we are coming from in terms of what we've done so far. So regarding the next MFF, as probably my colleagues in the previous session have said already, there are still negotiations ongoing. So there are many things that haven't been established yet. But what is clear is that migration will feature as a priority in the instrument for our external instrument that is relevant for the region, which is NDICI. I would like also to make a small correction of what you said earlier about the proposal on the 10%, because it's not earmarked. What is in the proposal is to have a spending target, which means that it doesn't really matter in which part of the instrument this money is spent. What is important is that there are the migration aspects are taken into consideration under different programs. So, for instance, if you have a program addressing energy in Morocco for green energy, and there is an aspect that involves also the employment of migrants in the sector, that would be something that could count towards achieving this target. So it's not, just to say, it's not a dedicated earmarked funding. Let's say that mostly what the objective is that there is sufficient funding to continue the important work that has been done so far, and bridge between the internal and external dimension of migration, and reflecting also the priorities that are coming from the new pact. Indeed, those priorities for the external dimension, as Georgia was saying, are cover many of the issues that we have covered already before, and deepening this dialogue with partner countries on the basis of an approach that is really based on comprehensive, tailor-made, and mutually beneficial partnerships, where we look at needs and interests together, and we target our actions, and where the drivers of migration are clearly important. Regarding the Southern Neighbourhood, as you know, our relations with most of the countries are based on partnership priorities, and the migration and mobility feature as one of these partnership priorities. So migration in the context of our new instrument and of the new pact will continue to be important in these relations and our and the dedicated programs. Speaking about programming, as you know, it cannot fully start, but there are some preparatory steps that are being taken in order to be able to have our multi-annual and annual programming in place next year. The consultation with civil society on the programming is something that is very important. I would like just to highlight. And as Electra mentioned before, it's important that you keep contact with our delegations on the ground in order to know when consultation take place and be able to be consulted at an appropriate time, and also with us indeed here in Brussels. So the work will not indeed start from scratch. We've been working on migration and forced displacement and mobility in the region for the past few years, especially after 2015 with the trust funds, as you mentioned, the EU Emergency Trust Fund for Africa, which for the region is the North Africa window, and the EU Regional Trust Fund in response to the Syrian crisis. In particular, the North of Africa window of the UTF has dedicated over half of its funding to actions focusing on protection of vulnerable migrants, on voluntary return and sustainable reintegration, which also includes the humanitarian evacuations from Libya for those migrants that were stranded there, and on community stabilization, especially in Libya. A third of our funding has gone to integrated border management in the region, and then the rest has been going to improve migration governance and support to labor migration and mobility in the region. For what regards Syrian refugees with the trust fund and for them in countries neighboring Syria, the EU has mobilized more than 2.2 billion euros, including the voluntary contributions of member states and other countries such as Turkey and the United Kingdom. And what has been funded was focusing on many aspects of this response, including health, education, support to livelihoods, protection, and the water sector, benefiting not only Syrian refugees and IDPs, but also the local communities, host countries in Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and the Western Balkans. So I don't want to talk more on these details, because if you have any specific questions, we can indeed reply on those. But I'm very looking forward to hear your comments and questions, and voila. Thank you.
Many thanks, Francesca. So indeed, now it's the time for interaction with the participants. So don't hesitate if you have questions to use either the chat box or the raise your hand function. We I have already a set of questions, so there are, already elements that I will bring forward now for you to answer. I will take the first one, which was asked at the beginning of the session, and maybe I don't know here if Petya or Electra will have to join again, knowing that they are working specifically on the preparation of the joint communication. But the question is if it's possible to outline which role migration management, promotion of legal possibilities for migration will play a role in both the new communication and the new ENI. So there is no new ENI, as you've mentioned already, but what are going to play these elements in the new communication. So this is the first one. Then we have other questions. One which is linked to the agreements on the worldwide forum in Marrakesh in 2016. So if the Pact is taking into account those agreements, and if yes, are there contradictions? And then the third question, which is who is supposed to conduct the pre-screening, the pre-entry screenings that you've mentioned, and are there any negotiations on readmission agreements ongoing with southern neighbors? So we'll take already these three questions. I let you answer. I don't know who's going to start, so I let you see.
Maybe if you want, I can start on the first question, and Electra can complement if she wants to add something. But regarding the joint communication, of course, the general objectives of the communication are really to bring a strategic outlook on other regional priorities than migration, but indeed the migration mobility will be considered in the communication, and in particular also in the framework of what we've discussed on the Pact. So this idea of looking at needs and interests, and specifically for this communication to target drivers of migration. But indeed, it will only be a part of the broader dimension, particularly on the economic and investment elements. So indeed, so this is the short reply.
Okay, thank you, Francesca.
Can I just add something?
Yes.
What I would like to add to what Francesca said is that we're working very closely with Francesca's team. We're working very closely with Georgia, and also with the colleagues from the Director General for Home Affairs, in order to make sure that the future communication is aligned with the external dimension of the Pact, and obviously connects the dots between migration and some of the other themes that Francesca mentioned. So what you can expect is that migration will be present as one of the themes, but it will not be the overarching one. It will be one of the areas where the EU will obviously take action, considering the needs and priorities of its partners in the South.
Thank you, Electra. So now we have the question linked to the Marrakesh forum. So if the new Pact is taking into account those agreements of the Marrakesh Worldwide Forum, I don't know who would like to answer on this. No?
Yes, maybe I can try to answer this question. Well, we have mentioned in our presentation that the Pact reinforces the partnerships with countries, bilateral partnerships, but one important component is also the fact that we try to promote cooperation also at the regional level. So we do have engagements in regional migration dialogues, for example, and our aim is also to promote a stronger role of the European Union also in the framework of the United Nations. So also in the context of multilateral relations, we do want to have a strong role. And of course, we do not want to have contradictions with the previous engagements and commitments.
Okay, thank you, Georgiana. And so now
sorry, if I may, Jon.
Yeah, of course.
Just a bit to add a bit on the first two questions. First of all, on the first question on the communication, I fully subscribe, to what Francesca and Electra have said. And as I said earlier, the whole idea is that migration is part of all this overall relationship with our southern partners, and is part not as the defining element, not as the defining issue, but as an issue that on the one hand needs to be taken into account, and as an issue that is linked also with many other issues. And this brings me to the second point on the compacts, on the UN compacts. The EU has been actively involved in the preparation of those compacts. And those compacts, to a large degree, also represent the key element of those compacts, of the migration compact, but also of the refugee compact, is the fact that this is a global challenge that requires global response and also requires global responsibility. And one of the elements also that is important to be taken also into account in the new communication, that we're talking about co-responsibility. The respect of human rights, rule of law, good governance, democracy, and all that is not something that is just an accessory. It is vital and it is important, but we need to understand, and it is the underlying conditions for our relationship, not only with regard to migration, but in general. Also with regard, for example, even on the economic side, in order to have investments, to promote investments, you need to have all these elements as a basis. It's something that is in the interest, it's something that the EU is actively promoting, and it's something on which also all the countries, all partners need to actively continue working in this direction. We've seen in the last decade that there has been a big change in the southern neighborhood. There has been democratic transition. We've seen development, but it's a path that we need to actively promote. It's not something that it's only for the EU, or it's not something for the EU to impose. It is something that it's a shared. It should be seen as a shared value of our relationship, of our partnership. So it's not only to pinpoint to the EU what the EU is doing, because it's something that is in the interest of all of us. It's something that should be considered as granted.
Okay, so thank you, Georgia. So we have a lot of questions actually. So I apologize already in advance if we will not be able to take them all. So yeah, now maybe if we can hear about the related to the pre-entry screenings and any negotiation on readmission agreements.
Well, thank you for this one. Maybe I can take it. The pre-entry screening will actually be applicable to all third country nationals who will enter the territory of the EU without an authorization. And this will include the health and security checks, as well as fingerprinting, registration in the Eurodac database. And who will do it? Actually, it is the authorities within the member states who have the competence to do so. So it is not something at EU level, but it will be actually the authorities within each member state who will carry out up this pre-entry screening. Regarding the negotiations on readmission, I mean, readmission, as I was mentioning, is actually part of the comprehensive partnerships that we are trying to promote. So, of course, it is an element of discussion that we are having with our partners, not only in the South, but in general. But, of course, we want to focus on comprehensive migration partnerships, so tackling also other areas of cooperation and not only the readmission. Maybe this would be it for this one.
Okay, thank you, Georgiana. I will take a last question here from the chat box, and then we have a participant whose name is Hassan, who's going to ask a question orally. So I will take the one here. I will say it in French because it's in French. So l'expérience a montré que l'Union européenne, en matière de migration, est de concentrer tous ses efforts sur la question de la réadmission des migrants dits irréguliers. Même les investissements dans les pays d'origine sont orientés vers des petites actions tendant à réinstaller des migrants de retour, alors qu'il est plus efficace de concentrer les investissements dans les zones à forte pression migratoire pour limiter la propension à émigrer chez les jeunes souffrant de chômage et de pauvreté. So I realize here actually that it's not really a question, but more a statement. So yeah, I don't know if you would like to comment on it. Otherwise, I will leave the floor to Hassan for an oral question.
Well, I can only repeat what I was saying, that our aim is to promote balanced partnerships, and it's not only the focus on return and readmission, but it's also the focus on protecting the refugees in their host countries. I was also mentioning building opportunities in the countries of origins and therefore contributing to reducing the root causes of irregular migration. We are also focusing our intervention in building the capacities of our partner countries so that themselves they are able to deal better with migration. That's why we are investing in countering smuggling activities, but also in reinforcing their own border management activities. And as I was also mentioning, we are trying to promote as much as possible legal migration pathways. And for this purpose, in the, we will launch the talent partnerships, which will build on the results that we have achieved with the legal migration pilot projects.
Just to add, Jan, I can completely subscribe to what Georgiana just said. And just to say, as I was mentioning earlier, our programs in the past years have focused on this whole range of issues, and protection was one of the main area of work that we had, and also indeed supporting socioeconomic stability, especially where migrants and refugees were hosted. So just to add to what she said, this is something that we have been doing very much.
Okay, thanks, Francesca. So we'll now leave the floor to Hassan.
If I may, John.
Sorry, Georgia. Yeah.
No, if I may, it's clear public money will never be enough to address the root causes of migration. This is something that we all we have to be frank about it. The private sector needs to be brought in. But in order for the private sector to be brought in, we need also to create the reforms, the necessary environment, an investment-friendly environment, and this requires economic reforms, social reforms, and political reforms. And this is a path that the EU is there to accompany, but it's not only for the EU to proceed. It's something that, the partner countries will also have to show the necessary commitment to proceed to the necessary reforms in all those areas so that we manage jointly to address. And there is this misconception that the EU is somehow outsourcing its problems because we don't manage to deal with migration on our shore of the Mediterranean, which is not true, because in the last decade, the EU has shown practically in very tangible and very concrete terms that it's taking up its responsibility, both in accepting people that were in need, both in supporting refugee communities, both in assisting countries in managing and in capacity building. So we should not see, the key point, and this is why we need to use this political momentum with this communication and the relaunch. And it was really nice because there was a frank and fruitful debate in Barcelona, is that it's not, we're past now, especially with the pressure that we're all having, both shores of the Mediterranean, to address the post-COVID recovery. We don't have anymore the luxury of pinpointing against each other on whose fault this is and who's outsourcing, and like to continue this blame game. The key issue is that we both managed to build a positive agenda based on because obviously we both, as third countries, also the EU has its own interests, and as the EU has its own public opinion, also partner countries have their public opinion. So taking into account both our sensitivities, our needs, and our interests, I think that it's in the interest of everybody to build this positive agenda and move forward. And this is what we're trying to do, both with the Pact and with this new communication.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. So now we will take the question, the oral question of Hassan. So Hassan, you have the floor. If I can ask you to be very brief because we are running out of time.
نعم، سوف أحاول الاختصار. شكرا للجميع وشكرا للمشاركين وكذلك متحدثين على هذه المعلومات القيمة. نحن كمحليين ومتابعين للحلقة الأخيرة لهذه المشاريع وهذا الدعم والاتفاقيات والمواثيق، نحن فقط تهمنا النتائج على أرض الواقع. قبل تقديم الدعم يجب أن يكون الدعم مشروط، وكلمة مشروط دائما نكررها، مشروط بثوابت بحقوق الإنسان. نطالب ونسأل: هل هناك دعم مشروط يضمن ثوابت حقوق الإنسان قبل تقديم أي دعم؟ أنا هنا أتحدث عن ليبيا، لأن الوضع في ليبيا جدا حساس واستثنائي. هذا فيما يخص السؤال الأول. السؤال الثاني تكرر على مسامعي وعلى مسامع الجميع: دعم الفئات الضعيفة. كلمة ضعيفة هو مفهوم أو كلمة عامة. السؤال: ما هي المعايير التي تحدد بها الفئات الضعيفة لكي يتم دعمها؟ النقطة الثالثة أو السؤال الثالث: هل هناك أي خطط ضمن الموازنة 2021-2027؟ هل هناك أي خطط لمكافحة ظاهرة التصحر، وأتحدث عن ليبيا خاصة في ظل تغير المناخ؟ وكذلك لا يوجد أي عمليات تشجير ولا يوجد دعم لأي نشاط زراعي في ليبيا، حيث أن خاصة في التصحر بدأ يظهر على مدن الساحل في عدم وجود مسطحات خضراء. فهل هناك أي خطط لمكافحة ظاهرة التصحر في ليبيا ضمن هذه الموازنة؟ وشكرا للجميع.
So thank you, Hassan. So I don't know who feels best placed to answer the questions of Hassan.
Well, maybe on the first question regarding who supported in Libya, well, the thing is that most of our funding, at least the majority of our funding in protection and also community stabilization goes mainly to the UN agencies, so UNHCR and IOM. We work with them, and UNHCR has the mandate to work with the people that are eligible for international protection, and the IOM works in general with the migrant population in Libya, and also with the host communities that have, let's say, those municipalities and places where migrants are. The type of assistance that is given to them is very varied, and much of it is direct assistance, food distribution, healthcare, and in general and also in general help to them that is very concrete. And at the same time, there are the resettlement activities, and also voluntary humanitarian returns for those migrants who decide to go back to their country of origin. So this is broadly what is done. And also in terms of community stabilization, is much about infrastructure, supporting hospitals, schools, and the provision of water in different areas of the country. So this is briefly the wide range of support, and I invite you also to look at there is a public information on this support. Voila, this is what I wanted to say regarding the protection of community vulnerable people.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. So I, believe that we are approaching the end of this panel. I've still seen some questions in the chat box. There are some that, let's say, everything is interlinked, but some are not directly related to the EU Pact on Migration. So I will not take them directly, but I see a last one which, let's say, is very important for the civil society, which is very simple but very complicated also at the same time. And the question, maybe I will reframe it a bit in the sense that it is asked if the collective and massive expulsions of migrants are in line with the respect of the human rights principle. I would say here the question could be reframed that way: what the EU can do to ensure that those expulsions are, in line with the human rights standards. What the EU has as power to ensure that human rights are correctly enforced. So, to conclude, I don't know if you would like to answer to this question.
Yes, maybe I can answer to these questions. I mean, the returns are carried out in compliance with the return directive, and the return directive includes safeguards on ensuring the human rights and ensuring that the human rights are respected. And basically there are legal remedies, there are appeal safeguards, the principle of non-refoulement is guaranteed by the return directive, and any return which is carried out from the EU is respecting the return directive. So therefore we make sure that the human rights are respected when we carry out return operations, when member states carry out the returns.
Thank you for this brief answer. I know the subject is very complex, and of course the civil society is closely monitoring those returns, as we know that sometimes the question of respects of human rights can be very sensitive. So we will be, of course, the civil society, still closely watching the issue. But yeah, now the time has come to end this panel. So I would like to thank you, Georgiana, Francesca, and Georgia, for your involvement in this discussion. Of course, at the level of Majalat, it's not finished yet. It's finished for today, of course, but we will have next events that we will have to plan, and namely the Brussels Civil Society Forum, for which we are going to take a decision soon on how to organize it. So now, many thanks again to the 6 EU panelists. I will leave the floor to my colleague Zahra, who will introduce the closure speech of this source seminar. So thank you all, and thanks to all the participants for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Jan. And thank you for all the participants, the attendees, and the panelists over the 2 days, yesterday and today, during the Majalat South seminar. Also would like to thank the interpreters and all the teams of the organization, the partner organization in Majalat, who helped in making this event a success, hopefully. I'll pass now the floor to Mr. Michel Toubiana, the Honorary President of Euromed Rights and the French Human Rights League, to give the closing speech for the South Seminar. Michel, the floor is yours.
Merci. Est-ce qu'il est possible de rétablir ma vidéo, puisque l'appareil me dit que c'est l'animateur qui a coupé ma vidéo. Bon. Ce sera donc sans vidéo.
Tu peux le faire maintenant.
Ah, je peux le faire maintenant. Ok, merci. Voilà. Je suis censé conclure ces moments de réflexion commune que les circonstances sanitaires nous ont contraints d'organiser sans aucune présence physique. Ce qui me conduit d'abord à constater le véritable manque, en tout cas moi c'est ce que je ressens, que nous ressentons tous à ne pouvoir vivre ces moments autrement qu'au travers des écrans plus ou moins animés, avec ou sans vidéo, et avec des voix plus ou moins déformées. C'est aussi une situation qui nous a empêchés de venir dire concrètement à nos amis libanais à Beyrouth toute notre solidarité, au peuple libanais, à sa société civile, dont on sait qu'il traverse des moments difficiles. C'est en même temps l'occasion de remercier toutes celles et tous ceux qui ont réussi à faire vivre ce séminaire, ces travaux, en particulier la AND, c'était pas évident. Maintenir nos capacités d'engagement et de réflexion dans un contexte propre à entraver toute activité, cela constitue un véritable défi que nous avons pu relever en organisant plus de 30 web-séminaires en amont de ce séminaire conclusif. Un grand merci donc à tous et un grand merci à nos interlocuteurs de la Commission européenne qui nous ont accompagnés dans cette aventure en maintenant leur présence et un dialogue permanent. Je n'ai bien sûr ni l'intention ni la possibilité de résumer l'ensemble de nos travaux en 10 minutes. Je voudrais seulement relever quelques points. La situation au temps du virus n'efface en rien les problématiques antérieures, elle les aggrave. De situations sociales encore plus dégradées et toujours plus inégalitaires, en restriction drastique des libertés et de l'espace démocratique, la région subit de plein fouet le double cantonnement sanitaire que sont les fermetures des frontières nationales et la disparition de tout moyen légaux de franchir la Méditerranée. En attendant, les drames succèdent aux drames et les réfugiés continuent à croupir dans des conditions sordides, victimes de tous les trafics, mais aussi de l'impuissance politique à traiter cette question. La pandémie qui sévit met en fait un peu plus à nu les maux que connaît la région. Utilisée par certains comme prétexte à encore moins de liberté, la Covid-19 souligne combien nous avons besoin des sociétés civiles et de sociétés civiles indépendantes, autonomes et écoutées par tous les pouvoirs en place. En attendant, la région continue à supporter une violence et une militarisation croissante. Et malheureusement, nous ne voyons pas les signes d'une amélioration. Les droits du peuple palestinien sont piétinés, le peuple syrien continue à subir un calvaire, que ce soit à l'intérieur ou à l'extérieur de ses frontières. La Libye s'enfonce toujours plus dans la violence et le désordre au gré des interventions extérieures. Ne nous y trompons pas, c'est bien sur ce terreau que se développent ces idéologies mortifères qui mettent en jeu la sécurité de tous. La xénophobie, le racisme, l'intolérance religieuse prospèrent sur les deux rives de la Méditerranée à la mesure de la sécurité sociale comme de l'absence ou de la restriction de l'espace démocratique. Dans ces conditions, maintenir un dialogue et une coopération entre les sociétés civiles des deux rives, comme avec les institutions européennes, est tout simplement vitale. Nous sommes profondément attachés à cet ensemble forgé au long des siècles que constitue la région euro-méditerranéenne. Nous croyons que la diversité de ces cultures et de ces peuples n'est pas un empêchement, mais au contraire une richesse, qui nous permet de dessiner un avenir commun reposant sur un patrimoine commun de valeurs. C'est le sens du projet Majalat. Et il faut remercier la Commission européenne d'avoir permis à ce projet, par ailleurs déjà ancien et sous d'autres formes, de prendre corps et d'exister. Ce dialogue entre institutions et société civile, et entre société civile elle-même, implique que les choses soient dites pour qu'elles permettent à chacun des participants de progresser. Les sociétés civiles sont, par nature, vous le savez, et c'est leur raison d'être, indocibles, ce qui n'a rien de contradictoire avec le fait d'entendre des préoccupations plus institutionnelles. Avec Majalat, nous avons montré qu'il était possible de réunir autour des questions les plus sensibles des partenaires très divers, tous représentatifs de leur environnement, mais qui concourent tous au même objectif. En s'appuyant sur les principes inscrits dans les droits de l'homme et les droits des peuples, construire un espace qui permette le développement de toute la région en respectant l'égalité de chacun de ses acteurs. Et j'ajouterai leur originalité aussi. C'est pourquoi nous espérons et nous souhaitons que le prochain forum qui aura lieu l'année prochaine ne soit pas le dernier. Il nous appartient bien entendu de le réussir et nous espérons que nous pourrons faire au mieux compte tenu des contraintes que nous imposera probablement encore la pandémie. Mais nous souhaitons pouvoir trouver les moyens d'approfondir et de rendre encore plus concret dans ses conséquences ce dialogue tripartite. C'est pourquoi aussi nous souhaitons être partie prenante de la préparation de la communication sur la politique de voisinage sud, car qui mieux que Majalat est à même de saisir et d'organiser cette consultation de la société civile qu'une telle communication implique. Nous avons, je l'espère, et nous aurons, je l'espère, une fois dissipées les contraintes que nous impose cet encombrant virus, encore beaucoup à faire. Demain avec le forum, après-demain en poursuivant ce dialogue absolument nécessaire aux peuples du Sud et du Nord de la Méditerranée. Encore une fois, merci à tous ceux associatifs, institutionnels, qui ont permis la réalisation de cet exceptionnel séminaire par voie de webinaire. Merci à tous et je vous donne rendez-vous à bientôt. Merci.
Merci Michel et merci encore à tout le monde. Et voilà, c'est la fin de notre séminaire et en attendant le prochain. Au revoir tout le monde.
À bientôt.
Au revoir. Au revoir.
Merci et bravo.
Grand merci aux interprètes aussi.